Mayor, councilman, you don't have to do this. You don't have to approve this conditional use permit to allow a 600-car-a-day car wash, a 24-hour 7-Eleven, and a gas station at Sunkist and Ball just because the out-of-town speculator hired Anaheim's most powerful lobbyist and contributed to you all as well. This is not how representative government is supposed to work. You're a council, not a paid-off rubber stamp. Some of you, pretending to be ultra-conservative, will say that a property owner has the right to do whatever they want with their property. Well, nobody believes that's always true, not even you. When an outside developer or speculator swoops in and buys up 3 acres in a built-out populated city and wants to do things with that property that the neighborhood doesn't want, meanwhile displacing or destroying 9 locally owned small businesses that have been there for decades, it's up to the Planning Commission and the Council to ask yourselves, whose interests do you work for? The LA speculator or Anaheim's residents and businesses? This is why you have a freaking vote on this. This same business on Santa Monica Boulevard, whether they're calling themselves Golcheh Properties, Anaheim Care, 5G LLC, or Shira, has tried the same thing all over Southern California, and the cities that have allowed them have regretted it. In 2019, just before they came to Anaheim, they tried to do the same thing in Pomona. But Pomona has a council and planning commission that cares about Pomona voters and Pomona quality of life, so they rejected them. You could look it up. Was that the end of the world? No, the speculator sold the property to someone else and headed over to Anaheim, where they'd heard that if they just made some contributions and hired Jeff Flint, the most powerful lobbyist in Anaheim, they could do whatever they wanted. I'm going to keep repeating this. I'm only standing here because I hope you all prove me wrong and vote on the people's side for once. You can do it. Did I mention how close the Planning Commission vote was on April 12th? There were 6 commissioners out of 7 who were able to vote. Oh, first, there's a good story there, too. That night, the Honorable Lucille Kring, and I call her honorable because she did the honorable thing that night, recused herself because she had received a contribution from the applicant. Well, maybe before you all vote, some of you should think about recusing yourselves as well because you got the same contributions. It's not too late. So with 6 commissioners, the people of Anaheim needed a 3-3 vote to deny the project, and here's how close we came. 3 commissioners voted yes, 2 voted no, and a new commissioner, Luis Andres Perez, felt like he didn't have enough information and abstained. He found out later that planning commissioners are not supposed to abstain unless they have a real conflict like Lucille did, and he later told many of us that if he'd known that, he would have voted no, and the project would have been denied then and there. That's how close it was. Bear that in mind. It almost lost at planning. This thing doesn't need to happen, and I'm only standing here because I think you might do the right thing and deny the permit. You can do it. Everybody, councilmen, public, don't get distracted by all the mind-numbing little details that they're going to throw at us tonight. These details are the tiny mitigations or improvements that planning forced the speculator to agree to make their awful project just a tiny bit less awful, but still awful. There must be a word for that. These tiny improvements or mitigations, a sound wall, security cameras, signs telling customers to keep their radios down, should not trick you into thinking this awful project is now good or necessary. With all respect to the planning department staff, who are hardworking professionals who have to follow their boss's orders, these are all slight cosmetic improvements, and the project is still the same one that Anaheim doesn't want or need. It's like, what is it like? It's like if our council told us we needed to be electrocuted because the electric chair company gave them lots of money and hired the town's most powerful lobbyist, Jeff Flint. But just look at the mitigations. We got them to put really comfy armrests on the electric chair with cushions and flowers. And we get to have whatever we want for our last meal. And we get to see a really pretty painting of the sunset while we're being electrocuted. But sorry, we can't see the real sunset because guess what? There's a 12-foot sound wall in the way. The wall versus the all-day cacophony of a 600-car-a-day car wash with vacuums. The Planning Commission took pity on the homeowners on South Hilda Street who would be subject to the loudest noise of all if this car wash happens. So they forced the speculator to build a wall, a 12-foot sound wall, overshadowing the backyards of these homeowners. Think how tall a 12-foot wall is. It's like one more of me standing on top of me, plus another few inches. And we live in the northern hemisphere, which means 90% of the year the sun is to the south. which means 90% of the year, Hilda Street backyards will get no sun and no view of the sky to the south. Perpetual shade. Either that or get used to the noise. A tough choice. One Hilda Street family is already selling their home because of this Sophie's choice. Councilmen, there's an obvious third choice besides the cacophony versus the 12-foot wall, and that choice is no car wash at Sunkist and Ball. Duh. Then there's the traffic. I think everyone in East Anaheim knows how bad the traffic already is there between the nearby 57 freeway and the neighboring schools. It's maddening gridlock for much of the day. The speculator hired a traffic consultant, hired them to tell us what they want us to hear, that this project won't make the traffic even worse. But come on, who are you going to believe, your common sense and experience or a hired traffic consultant? Later on, we'll read a statement from Anaheim's Joseph Schenk, a professional engineer, like the mayor, and retired public works official, explaining why, yes, the traffic will get a lot worse with the project. And all that just to have one more car wash when there's already 8 within a mile. Meanwhile, Green Jet wants to build a 10th one near State College in Lincoln. Steve, maybe we should start calling District 5 the car wash district. What do you think? One more 7-Eleven when there are 6 within a couple miles, including one half a mile away. One more gas station across the street from a popular Arco, whose owners will be speaking later. This does not need to happen. Nobody wants this or needs this except for the speculator. Neighbors worry, too, about a 24-hour 7-Eleven on the corner, bringing all kinds of people at all hours of the night, many of whom will be loitering, hollering, brawling, sometimes committing crimes. What is the speculator's response to this concern? She says, we trust the Anaheim Police Department to keep order for us. Yes, our overworked APD. This is called privatizing the profits and socializing the costs. That's a good expression to remember. We see it all the time when big companies and rich people get away with it. Privatize the profits and socialize the costs. The Planning Commission meekly suggested that the 7-Eleven hire a nighttime security guard, but that would cut into the speculator's profits. So instead, they said they'll install cameras. Cameras. The back area behind the stores is already full of homeless people at night who sleep there and light fires, and the residents are up in arms about that. I'm sure the speculator, Shira, will blame that on the businesses that are currently there, but they are not open 24 hours, and this is her property. Shira is already being a bad neighbor. If this project is denied and the speculator sells the property to someone else, that'd be a win-win. And here, at the risk of sounding like a meanie, we have to look at the credibility of the speculator, whose spokesman and point person is Shira Zagi. You'll be hearing her later. This is important. Can you take her at her word, or do you need to take her word with a truckload of salt? I listened to her testimony at the April 12th Planning Commission meeting. To start with, a person who constantly says, I'm not someone who likes to lie, and I'm not someone who likes to exaggerate, and I'm a nice person, raises a lot of red flags with most of us. And it's amazing the things that Shira told the Planning Commission that night that couldn't possibly be true, and this is all on tape. An hour into the hearing, she amazed the crowd with these words. I personally walked around the community within half-a-mile radius of the shopping center, and I knocked on over 150 doors. There, I was able to meet with people from all different walks of life. Support for our project was overwhelming and heartwarming. Some even offered to donate to our campaign. People were very excited about the opportunities for new jobs, especially during these precarious times. Yeah, jobs at 7-Eleven or a car wash, but I digress. And of course, we kept in close contact with our Hilda Street neighbors. Commissioner Keys asked if I had all their support. I've spoken with every single neighbor, and almost all of them have signed or have emailed me that they want this Sunkist deal. The only neighbor that has not done so has been out of the city for a couple weeks now. When I spoke to her in the past, she was very receptive of the idea and appreciated our outreach. This was jaw-droppingly audacious. Back in the real world, the Planning Commission received nearly 1,000 emails in opposition, mostly from the neighborhood, and virtually 0 in support. At the December 2019 meeting that the speculator was forced to hold, over 100 neighbors showed up and opposition was unanimous. The Yeager House has a file of 4,000 emails supporting them staying where they are, and 2,200 signatures on the Save the Yeager House petition. Yet Shira claims the exact opposite. Unanimous support. They even want to give her money. What could she be telling these neighbors? Or is she just making stuff up? Well, if you were her and you had the signatures and emails of that many neighbors supporting your project, wouldn't that be the first thing you showed the Planning Commission and the Council? Guess what? Nobody has seen that, so draw your own conclusion. But wait, you don't have to. A mere 20 minutes later, Commissioner Perez asked, of the 10 units on the south side of Hilda Street, how many are in support of the development? And Shira answered, there's one neighbor who I'd say is ambivalent, and one neighbor is in support. The rest of them do not want this, I'll be honest. But almost all of them really appreciate the outreach. Our outreach has really been more than any other outreach my family has ever done. Well, that's more believable. But it's the exact opposite of what you said 20 minutes earlier. First she says all of Hilda Street supports it except for one lady who's out of town. 20 minutes later, one supports, one's ambivalent, and to be honest, the rest of them are against it. Why did her story change so dramatically? I have no idea. Maybe people just can't lie to Luis Andres Perez. Well, there's a history of Shira's stories changing, especially when she's promising money to someone. I'll talk later about all the different lies she told to Sandy in the Yeager house in front of witnesses. Actually, she promised all the businesses at Sunkist Plaza relocation money in front of witnesses and later denied it. It's important for the council to know you can't believe the speculators' claims and promises. Another thing she claimed to the Planning Commission is that that's hard to believe, is that this project's profit margin is so slim. This family didn't come from Santa Monica Boulevard and snatch up these 3 acres in East Anaheim to make a few $1,000s. They came to make a few $1 million. Esteemed councilmen, I want to hold you all to your fine words. Trevor, when your council majority grew from 5 to 6 last November, you exulted that Anaheim now had a pro-business council. You didn't say pro-out-of-town developer council, you said pro-business. This project is killing local businesses, displacing or destroying 9 locally owned small businesses. I would think a pro-business council would care about protecting those businesses more than the profits of a Los Angeles speculator. Avelino, back in March, you said, in the context of trying to get Governor Newsom to open businesses, no large California city has been affected by this pandemic as much as Anaheim. And it's not just City Hall. Working families and small businesses have suffered. 15,000 people are out of work. Thousands of small businesses have closed, some for good. Many of these small businesses represent someone's life investment. Stirring words and truthful. And these 7 businesses at Sunkist Plaza are some of those that have struggled heroically through COVID. And you should be protecting them from being finished off now. Mr. Diaz, you're an immigrant who owns a small business, just like the 6 immigrant-owned small businesses in the Sunkist Plaza strip mall. His Nibs Liquor, owned for 20 years by Syrian-American Elias. Melchor Bakery, owned for 17 years by Guatemalan-American Miguel. Home Masters Consulting, owned for 17 years by Syrian-American Fadi. A New Look Beauty Salon, owned for 17 years by Mexican-American Rocio. Westway Cleaners, owned for 16 years by Korean-American Sarah Song, and Ace Flower Shop, owned for 23 years by Korean-American Hae Kyung Kang. Think about your fellow immigrants when you vote, Mr. Diaz, before they're all displaced and put out of business. Only Miguel has found a possible location to move to. None of them are getting help, and most of them will be speaking later. Mr. Fessel, this is your district and mine. Half of these neighbors voted for you, and you know how unpopular this project is. You need to do more than just vote no if you really want your constituents to believe you fought against this project. You should be arguing passionately against it here tonight, and I hope you've been twisting a couple of your colleagues' arms as well. I'm only standing here because I hope for once you guys will do the right thing and stand up to the most powerful lobbyist in Anaheim, the guy who almost always gets his way, Jeff Flint. Speculator has paid Mr. Flint at least $100,000 as of February, after refusing to help any of the displaced tenants, to set up meetings with planning commissioners, city planners, and Mr. Fessel. By now, she's probably given Flint $200,000. A few years ago, lobbyist and former Mayor Kurt Pringle used to run everything around here, but then he moved out of town. But he never really left Anaheim. He left behind his longtime right-hand man, Jeff Flint, as a sort of viceroy to rule this town in his place. Jeff Flint, who's been at Pringle's side since his scandalous and illegal placing of poll guards in Santa Ana in 1988 to intimidate Latino voters and try to ensure a Republican victory. I've been butting heads with Jeff Flint since 2008 when he was the lobbyist for Proposition 8, which made it illegal for our gay friends to get married in California. Jeff Flint won that one, and for a few years, LGBTQ folks were denied that basic civil right. Many gay Californians died unable to marry the person they loved. Sometimes I wonder if Councilman Brandman knows all that. I fought Jeff Flint hard on Prop 8, I was defending same-sex marriage, and Flint won until his victory was declared unconstitutional. Flint's whole career, as far as I can tell, has been all about helping the strong beat up the weak. I hope Jordan will think twice before he takes Jeff Flint's orders again. I know Jeff Flint's Green Law Partners has donated a lot to all 6 of you. He managed to give $10,000 in one night to Mayor Sadu at a 2020 Save the Mayor dinner when we were first trying to recall Harry. Now Harry can do whatever he wants with that money. $10,000 in one night. It must be hard for you all to say no to Jeff Flint, but he doesn't need to have a 100% success rate. Of course, I'm only standing here because I hope you all prove me wrong tonight and listen to Anaheim's people for once. Not like you did to the poor Mexican-American people of Pauline Street who didn't want 39 three-story townhomes overlooking their backyards, and Harry only gave them 1 minute each to speak, but I digress. Now I need to tell you about an Anaheim hero, Sandy Schweiger, the owner of the Jaeger House. She opposed this project from the beginning for the same reasons everybody else does, and she didn't want to have to move. She's been in her Sunkist and Ball location over 40 years and has provided a meeting place to all sorts of community groups. The Jaeger House is one of this German-founded town's 2 German restaurants. After the Phoenix Club closes, it'll be the only one, and it's internationally popular. Sandy didn't want to move from Sunkist and Ball, but she didn't know how this would turn out, and she had to save her restaurants, so she finally found a decent location on Anaheim Boulevard, just north of City Hall, real close, and signed a 10-year lease there. So now she's stuck moving no matter how this decision turns out. But it's an expensive move. And just like for most businesses, the year of COVID has been a real challenge for Sandy. Last year, when trying to win Sandy over, Shira, the speculator, promised her $100,000 to help her move. She promised that in front of a crowd of witnesses, including Paul Cott and Steve White. Later, she denied ever saying that. But then Shira offered Sandy $40,000, which would still be a lot of help, but it came with strings attached. If Sandy accepted that money, she'd have to agree not to speak against this project. And Sandy was considering that offer. But then, at the April 12th meeting, Shira told the Planning Commission that Sandy had declined her offer. When Shira said that, her voice dropped down so quietly that most of the room couldn't hear her, but you can hear it clearly on the recording. It was a total lie. So Sandy's getting no help in relocating, but at least she's free to speak out, and she would be here tonight, but she's in the hospital. After the Planning Commission vote, Sandy asked me to file an appeal, which is why we're here tonight. She gave me the money to file the appeal. But first, understand that she had nothing to gain from this appeal. She's already stuck moving to this new location. She did it to help her old neighbors, the 6 remaining small businesses of Sunkist Plaza, which are like a family, and in solidarity with her old neighborhood, which supported her through the decades and unanimously doesn't want this project. Well, apparently, this council really didn't want to have to discuss and vote on this project in public. We still don't know how you guys found out that Sandy had financed the appeal. I could have come up with the $450 myself. But the next day, somebody called Sandy all furious and said, "Why did you give Vern money for that appeal? You shouldn't have done that." He told her 2 other memorable things. This car wash is inevitable, and you might not like how this turns out for you. 2 hours later, the health department showed up at the Jaeger House looking for reasons to close Sandy down for any little thing. They did this a few days in a row. First time in 40 years. Sandy weathered all that because she runs a tight ship. But Anaheim voters, this is the kind of gangster behavior we're dealing with. I just want everyone to know that it's thanks to Sandy of the Jaeger House that we're even able to have this little bit of democracy and accountability in Anaheim. And everybody should support her by eating at the Jaeger House at its old location until it moves in the fall or winter. And then again when it moves to Anaheim Boulevard. They really need your business at this time. And so do the other little businesses on Sunkist Plaza. Big variety of services they offer. Check it out. Okay, in closing for now. When Mayor Sadu gave his acceptance speech in 2018, raised his arms wide and proclaimed, "Anaheim is open for business," it should not have meant Anaheim is on sale to the highest bidder. Councilmen, please try doing the right thing for the people who voted for you. You might like how it feels. You might do it again. Thank you for your time.
I will now invite the applicant to address the council. The time limit for the presentation is 20 minutes.
Thank you. And good evening, Mayor, council members, and staff. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak before you tonight. My name is Shira, and I'm standing here before you tonight also representing my father and my brother. We run a small family-run commercial real estate business. We are immigrants, and just like our tenants, I really feel for their position. One thing about us being immigrants that I think is very important is that I really appreciate the importance of community, and especially in my community, we really appreciate knowing each other, and that's why we started we started our journey with this property at the Sunkist Library, where we got to know over 100 Anaheim residents. We heard their perspective about our property. We then continued our outreach when we went door knocking. I not only spoke with the Hilda Street neighbors to the north, but I went to the north, south, east, and west of our property, where I had the chance to knock on over 150 doors and speak to people from all different walks of life. Yes, there were those who opposed, but support was overwhelming, and those support mainly came from the people to the west and to the south and to the southwest. People who live in apartments, who appreciate new business coming, who appreciate jobs like the 7-Eleven jobs and the car wash job. Not only that, but we had a virtual town hall meeting where we had a chance to speak to many of Anaheim residents, and those Anaheim residents also had the opportunity to ask our engineers questions and also myself questions about the development. We want to thank the city staff for your amazing support and help through this process. It's been a long road since we began, about 2 years now, and we really appreciate the work that you've put into it and your advice and ingenuity. I also want to thank the Anaheim community for your hospitality and your great suggestions through our process. When I look at our site plan now, I can see so much of your voice and your ideas in our site plan. The wall, for example, when we wanted to build this property, when we were envisioning how this property would look, we thought of building an 8-foot wall, and that would be to code. That would also satisfy the sound studies. But our neighbors have asked us, instead of building an 8-foot wall, to build a 10-foot high wall with a 2-foot plexiglass. Now, we absolutely want to help our neighbors, and we have agreed to incorporate that into our plan, as you see that before you tonight. But one thing I would like to mention is that per our sound study, the 8-foot wall would suffice in mitigating noise created by our property. In fact, if you look at our property, there are a lot of mitigation measures in place specifically for sound. For instance, the car wash tunnel that's being used actually traps sound inside. Not only that, there's an 8 by 25-foot wall coming out of the car wash. So any sound coming out of the car wash is then deflected onto wall. Another mitigation measure is that there's a 5-foot high wall above the 7-Eleven to block any of the sound their equipment makes. So that sound also doesn't go to the nearby homes. So if you look at the difference between our initially proposed 8-foot wall to the now 12-foot wall, the difference in sound that our neighbors will hear is between 0 and 3 decibels. So you may ask, well, why is it so little? We're going from 8 feet to 12 feet. And the reason for that is because we've done already so much to mitigate noise that the noise that the neighbors are hearing are not actually from our uses. They're from the ambient noise of Ball Road and the freeway. Let's recap on what the site looks like. It's a long, narrow site with month-to-month tenants. Now, what are month-to-month tenants? Well, month-to-month tenants, in our case, were inherited from a previous owner, an owner who had run down all of the tenants' leases to a month-to-month term. So currently, they don't have leases. And that means that there's really no obligation from us to them and no obligation from them to us. Although there is no obligation, we still felt there's a moral obligation. And that's why we didn't have to, but we wanted to. We wanted to help them. So what we have done to help them has been that we actually, when we came into the property, we didn't raise their rent to market values. They were all well below market values, but we didn't raise them to market values. We kept them at their low rate. Another thing was we didn't increase their CAM. As you all know, when a property is sold, the property tax is reassessed. And in our case, it was reassessed to a much higher value because the previous owners had it from years before. So now we're paying about $80,000 a year in taxes. This would have been something that any other property owner would have then expected their tenants to absorb. That would have been in CAM. But we didn't do that. And so if you look at all these measures that we've done to help our tenants in terms of not raising their rent, in terms of offering COVID support, in terms of rent that is still delinquent, and in terms of them not having to pay CAM payments, that help that we have done is in tune about $350,000. $350,000 when not only our tenants were suffering from COVID, but so were we. And commercial real estate has, and I'm not saying all commercial real estate, but we've definitely felt it very hard. It's been very difficult during COVID, but we didn't want our tenants to suffer more than they had to, which is why we absorbed that cost. Now, I understand that nobody's excited about a car wash and gas station. Nobody wakes up thinking, oh, wow, I would love to have our car wash and gas station on this site. But here's the thing. These uses work. They work for this site. They work for being on a major street, and they work for being right off the freeway. We actually approached many other major retailers, such as McDonald's, Chick-fil-A, Raising Cane's, Trader Joe's, and they've all declined it, among others, I should say, but they've all declined it. And the reason is, again, because of the layout, it's very thin and long. It doesn't work for every use. But since it doesn't work for the other uses, we resolved to make this the best car wash and gas station that it can be. So here's what we've done with the help of staff to make sure that this car wash and gas station can be the best that it can. First of all, we flipped the orientation of the car wash. Initially, we had the queuing in the front and the vacuums in the back. But we realized that the vacuums being in the back, although we can tell the customers to keep the music down and things like that, still, they might be loud. And that's something that's not completely under our control. So now those vacuums are in the front. So that sound, again, will be able to go on to Ball and not back into the homes. Another thing, it allows for the queuing to be longer. So now, instead of a shorter queuing, we have over 30-car queuing available at this site. Another thing that we've done to improve our plan is that approximately 25% of our square footage is now being used as landscape. If you think about that, that's 25% of what we're purchasing is now landscape. Now, I know that neighbors have asked if we can build a park instead of our uses, but if you think about it, this is really the next best thing. And, of course, the wall that I had mentioned, that at the suggestion of our Hilda Street neighbors is now, instead of 8 feet, now it is 12 feet. One more thing that we've done is that we ask 7-Eleven to find the best franchisee they can. So in California, one of the best franchisees that they've had is, fortunate for us, Jason Hatani, who actually has another store in the area. And he's brought his store from a mid-level performing store to one of the top performing in the state. So we're happy to have him be the franchisee at our location. And Jason has committed to local givebacks that he would like to perform quarterly. Not only that, he's offered jobs to people in the area. Jobs not only to people in the area, but even our tenants. He actually told me that he has jobs available for them if they are interested. Now, I know that the opposition is concerned about homeless. There is a talk about 7-Eleven, and if we build a 7-Eleven, will the homeless come? Well, right now, we're having a homeless problem right now today at our site. These past couple of weeks, homeless have come in our alley, and they've lit fires, and of course, we're on top of it to remove them. But my point is here, it's not a problem that's associated with 7-Eleven. It's a problem that's a city problem that we can help you be part of the answer. And later, my associate, Chris Gabriel, can actually come up and say how in the past 7-Eleven can be part of the response and help embolden the city so that this doesn't become a problem. And to sum up, we appreciate the opportunity to speak before you tonight and to present our plans. It is a plan that, again, we're not asking for any variances. Except for out of the utmost consideration for our Hilda Street neighbors. So we come to the clear entitlement package, and we hope that we can gain your positive consideration tonight to move forward with our plans and hopefully make Anaheim an even more beautiful city and have this corner be a better representation of this great city. Thank you.